Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I am honored to have Bryan Clayton with me. Bryan is the CEO and co-founder of GreenPal, and he's had other businesses. So we're going to hear about the entrepreneurial journey, but I'm excited to talk about this one. And one of Bryan's mottos, and I think this is going to speak to his business acumen, is nail it and then scale it. So I think there's a focus on, becoming really good before you get, too much momentum and topple over. So Bryan, thanks so much for being on today.
Thanks for having me on, Phil. Great to be here.
You bet. So I want to start with a defining moment for you. You're sitting in your room, you're playing Nintendo like many kids do, and your dad comes in and says, "Hey, this isn't going to keep going on." So talk a little bit about what happened and what transpired from that conversation.
Yeah, boy, that's not the truth. I think life boils down to moments that mean it all, and weeks and years that mean little. And that was definitely a moment in my life. I was playing Super Mario Kart on a hot summer day, like most kids in the mid '90s. And my dad came in my room and said, "Hey, get off your butt. You got a gig to do. You're going to go mow the neighbor's grass." And we weren't living in a democratic household, so this was pretty much a direct order. And I begrudgingly went along with him, and we mowed the neighbor's yard. And I got paid $20 to do that. And I thought, this is incredible. You mean to tell me I could have been doing this all along? I can just go work for an hour and make $20, which in the mid '90s was insane. And so I remember after that, I was just hooked. Yeah, sure, it was hard work, and I got grass all over me, and I smelled like gasoline. But the first thing I did was I started passing out flyers all over the neighborhood. I went on my little old school desktop computer and made with clip art and all the latest technology back then, made like a bunch of flyers. And by the end of that first summer, I had maybe 10 or 15 customers, and I was off and going. And I never looked back. I always just had my own business, and I stuck with that little lawn mowing business all through high school, and then put myself through college mowing grass. And when I graduated college, I had to make a decision. Was I going to go into the job market and take a pay cut, or stick with this grass cutting business I had? And I didn't really want to be a lawn guy my whole life, but I thought, hey, why not? Let's see, maybe this is my lane in life. I saw business ownership as kind of like my lane. And I just made a little business plan, and over a 15-year period of time, built it into one of the largest landscaping companies in the state of Tennessee, where I live, and then sold it in 2013. So grew that business just from me and a push mower to me and 150 people. I got it over 8 figures a year in revenue, and I sold it, and I was able to retire at the age of 32.
Yeah. So I want to rewind a little bit to some of those early days in the lawn mowing business because, I think there's so many people or kids, growing up that is a job that they have. And to your point, you kind of get to that spot where it's like, well, it's awkwardly too big for me to just do it. But it's probably not big enough to be like hiring, full-time adults to come on board of my business. So for you, how did you scale originally? Was it asking a couple buddies, "Hey, I'll pay you $15 and charge 20 so I still make some," or how did you scale in the early years?
Yeah, you're right. It's the greatest business in the world to do small. It's a really awesome side hustle, and it's the greatest business in the world to put an extra $1,000 in your pocket every week. It is a challenging business to scale and do big because you have a lot of gravity that's constantly dragging you down. And every service business is this way. And so high competition, low barriers to entry. It's very asset intensive. You have to buy expensive pieces of equipment to perform the service. There's like all kinds of the cost drivers like fuel and things that are constantly going up, and then customers aren't usually willing to pay a premium. So it's challenging business. So for me, I think like in the early days, I just had a chip on my shoulder. I just really just for some reason thought that this was the thing that I could do to create something of myself. And I thought it was the thing that I could do to like excel and achieve in life. And that's really how I saw it. And so
Yeah.
for many, many years, like and still to this day, 20 years later, my business is me. I am my business. So,
Yep.
I'm always like just looking at my personal life and how I'm architecting my personal life and my personal expenses and how it impacts my business. So I know if I can live on like $2,000 a month, that means there's more money in the business to reinvest in the business. And
Yep.
that's how I ran that company. And so for many years, it was like I didn't pay myself this rice and beans, and I would do everything I could do to save up money to buy another truck or buy another
Yeah.
lawnmower. And I didn't make any money for like 6 years. But I had a plan. I was working to acquire the assets, acquire the people, acquire to fulfill out and build out the system for operations, for sales, for customer service, for all these things. And I was just little by little working this plan, and it was a long-term vision to kind of get from just me and a push mower mowing residential properties to me sending out, what ultimately became 90 trucks out every day, taking care of properties like apartment complexes, office complexes, airports, things like that. So there was about a 5-year transition where I really just kind of had to work that plan and have faith and stay disciplined about it. And it worked out. So I'm glad I was able to do it. I lost you.
Now, now, in this type of a business, like you mentioned, it is something where it's a lot based on who is Bryan, right? And what's the business that you're running. So talk a little bit about, being a person of your word, acting in integrity, doing what you said you're going to do, because at the end of the day, who Bryan is also directly impacts the business and vice versa, right? What the business is directly is impactful to who Bryan is.
Yeah, it's one of the cool things about running a company, running a business, founding a business is that it's going to cause you as a human being to level up. It's going to cause you to acquire skills and knowledge and wisdom and soft skills and EQ and things like that you never would have. And so, you're going to have to become a decent manager. You're going to have to become a decent leader and kind of know the difference between the two. And you're going to have to set the standard for the business. You're going to have to set the standard of quality, a standard of excellence, what the culture is. And in the vein of that kind of question, it hit me like a ton of bricks one day. I was driving to the office, and it was probably year 8 or 9, and I really didn't want to go there. I didn't want to go into my own business that day. And I got to a point where just a lot of the people that worked there were negative people,
Mm.
and I was pissed off all the time. And we were always like up against really stiff competition, and it was always really tense, and it was just a really tense environment and not a fun place to be. And
Yeah.
I thought to myself, I don't know why this hit me, but I thought to myself, well, you created this,
Mm.
you built this, you hired every one of these people, or at least approved of them. So this is a reflection of you.
Yeah.
And so, like, as a founder, as a CEO, as a company owner, you get exactly the culture you deserve at all times. And
Yeah.
it usually is a reflection of who you are personally.
Mm.
Usually a small business is like the founder and then scaffolding built out around the founder. And so, like, the founder is just like inflection point, and sets the stage, sets the tone, sets the standards, sets the vibe. And I had to really go through a personal development phase of, I can really just decide. I can really choose what kind of culture I want here. I can really choose what the vibe is. I can make that decision, or I can do the weak thing and just suffer it and make it miserable for everybody else. So it was a long growing period for me, but that was a realization I came to, that you get exactly the culture you deserve as the founder.
That's good. So, I mean, just kind of piggybacking off that, you're growing, like you said, you end up getting to 150 employees. I mean, that's just tough to, cultivate a culture, or if you realize, hey, there's a problem with the culture, to just radically change it in a quick time frame because you've already built it so large. So, were there things that you ended up doing to adjust the culture, whether that was, hey, I recognize that these people are not the right, fit for the job, and that we just need to part ways, or hey, here are some things we're going to do from a team building standpoint. Talk a little bit about, maybe having that realization and what you did about culture thereafter.
Yeah, it's a real simple way to put it is we implemented a no assholes policy. If somebody was just straight up a jerk to customers or to coworkers, I mean, we fired them. I mean, we had
Yep.
to. And that helped quite a bit. And so that, just that cutting out that cancer can remarkably improve the vibe of the workplace. The other thing, I watched this presentation about how the Navy SEALs select coworkers, how they select recruits, and they have kind of a 2x2 quadrant, and on one axis is talent, and on the other axis is trust.
Mm,
And they look for a combination of the two. And so on the lower left hand quartile is low talent, low trust. Of course, you don't want those people. And then on the upper right hand is high talent, high trust. And of course, that's who you want, but that's almost impossible to find. And
yeah.
then you're constantly having to make this trade off between, okay, this person is super talented. Maybe they
Mm,
can kill somebody with their bare hands with a blindfold on, but they're not very trustworthy. Well,
yeah.
they don't ever consider that person. They're really looking for the person who is more or less maxed out on the trust quadrant and has just enough talent
Mm,
because they can teach them the talent.
right.
And so in a using the Navy SEALs as an extreme version of the standard of excellence of recruitment, that's kind of how we look to rebuild it from the inside out. Was like, if we didn't trust the person and we didn't genuinely like them, then we let that be a deciding driving factor in terms of, I wouldn't suffer these people, no matter how talented a salesperson they are, no matter how talented a technician they were. And using that as kind of a guiding light over 2 or 3 years, we were able to rebuild the culture from the inside out. But it took a long time because
Absolutely.
you can't undo 5-10 years of mistakes in a month. It takes time.
Yep. That's good. So I want you to also highlight a little bit about, what having a job early on did for your work ethic. For me, I like a lot of kids, I had a newspaper route growing up. So that meant, hey, you're up at 5 a.m. Sunday through Saturday, so you can go get it. Rain, snow, hot as heck. You got to get out and get people their newspaper. And that instilled a work ethic in me. But talk a little bit about that for you, starting your business as young as you did, and then, being really the driving force of the business.
Yeah, I think one of the best things you can do is for your children, or even as a young person yourself, is to work a shitty job. Work, like there's a venture capitalist that will not invest, who I follow and read all of his stuff. He says he will not invest in somebody unless they've worked a crappy job. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they graduated from MIT or just graduated from Stanford, and they have all of these other positive signals. If they haven't worked as a server at Applebee's or something, he will not hire them, not fund them. And so I think that one thing working a crappy job or starting a crappy business in your early years can teach you is like the superpower of just discipline, and the
Mm,
superpower of consistency. And as like simple as those things are, a lot of people don't have consistency. A lot of people don't have discipline. What it
yeah.
means to show up day in, day out over a long period of time, whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
As simple as that sounds, like that's one of my superpowers in both of my businesses. It's just grinding out the hard stuff and doing it over a long period of time and working towards a goal. These are just simple concepts that I think you learn at a young age if you work a crappy job or start a tough business.
That's perfect. I love that. So you mentioned it earlier, you grow it to a great size, one of the largest in Tennessee. And so then across the country, there's some bigger businesses, and they recognize that and they say, well, gosh, maybe we'd like to acquire you. So talk a little bit about the acquisition of it, but then also you talk about how maybe I wasn't meant to retire at 32 years old.
Yeah, well, I wish it was as easy as like somebody was knocking on my door and said, "Hey, can we buy this landscaping business?" But that's not how it happened. I made the personal decision that it was time to pursue an exit from the company for one reason. I mentioned earlier, when you're starting a business, running a business, you're evolving as a brand new
Mm-hmm.
person every 3 or 4 or 5 years. You're getting skills around leadership. You're getting skills around management. Maybe you're picking up skills around sales or team building, and that's one of the funnest things about it. I had reached like a plateau
Mhm.
in that kind of growth pattern, I guess you could say. Like I had topped out almost, and it was bugging me. It was bugging me for like a year or two. And I thought, well, maybe I can sell this business and move on and do something else. And boy, I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know like how hard it was to sell a business. And I started, the first thing I did right, I did a lot of things wrong, but the first thing I did right was I started working with this broker who focused just on my industry. Like he had
Mhm.
spent 20, 30 years selling businesses in my industry, and he knew kind of what we needed to look like from the inside out. He knew what the numbers needed to look like and what the systems and processes. And so I started to rebuild the business
Yeah.
from the inside out. And it took like 2 years, but executed on a plan, and then we were able to take it out and get it sold over a 2 or 3 year period of time. Ideally, you work a proactive like exit strategy that's 5 or 10 years, but I didn't do that, and I didn't really know what I didn't know. And
Yep.
but I was able to get it done, and the people that bought it did a good job. And but it was a challenging thing, one of the most challenging things I've ever done.
Yeah. So, like you said, hey, after I sell this thing, now I've got enough money where financially, I potentially don't ever have to work again. I can if I want to. And for a little while, I'm sure that sounded good because I'm sure it took a lot of time, effort, sacrifice to build the business to what it did. But after doing that for a little bit, you're like, all right, I got to get back and do something.
Yeah, it is exactly how it unfolded. I was able to take away enough money and invest it to where I didn't have to work anymore, which was nice, and live a comfortable lifestyle. Uh, but I got bored really quick. I remember I was like sitting on a beach in Costa Rica for like 2 weeks, and I remember the only problem I had faced in like 2 weeks was that the bar ran out of my favorite type of tequila, and I was like, "Oh, whoa,
Those can't happen.
yeah." I've got more. There's more things in life that I'm set up to solve, and so I thought, man, maybe I need to get back into something. Maybe I don't want to do what I just did because that was really hard, but maybe I need to get back into something. Not quite that intense, but something. And I
Yeah.
thought, well, I'll just start a software business because those are easy. I thought, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to have to deal with 150 trucks every day, and guys that are machismo who run lawnmowers all day. Like, I don't want to do that because that was really hard. I'm going to start a simple, easy business, a software business. And boy, I didn't know what I didn't know, but I had the idea, and I thought, hey, let's do this. So I thought, an app needs to exist for what I just spent the last 15 years doing. And somebody should be able to push a button and order a lawn mowing service. And this was like 2013, 14 when Uber and Lyft were taking off and Airbnb was taking off, and so these kind of mobile based apps were solving real world problems that were occurring in people's lives. And I thought, I can build an app where people can order a lawn mowing service,
Yep.
and it'll be so simple. We'll just build it, and it'll only take a couple of years, and we'll just be off and going. And I recruited two co-founders, started working on it. We paid a dev shop to build the first version of what we thought GreenPal should be, and spent like 150 grand doing that. Launched it, and it was a total just flop, like crickets. Um, we hustled up like 100 people to use the thing by passing out flyers, and realized real quick this is a lot harder than we ever imagined it ever could be. Everything from how do you design the product, how do you like invent a new product from scratch, like to the technology execution, to getting vendors to care about it, to use it, to solving the quality issues of the vendor doing a good job, to recruiting homeowners to use. Like, it was just so
Yeah.
many like paradigms of difficulty, um like dimensions of difficulty that I didn't anticipate. And I thought about quitting, and to say, hey, this is gonna be a lot harder. But something hit me. I thought, well, I already tried the retirement thing, so I'm not going back to that. So I guess from now on, I'm just going to work on my best idea. And this is my best idea. I'm not terribly creative. I don't have any other good ideas. This is all of them. And so let's just keep working on this. And we did. And we were validated by talking to our customers, the dozen customers we had, maybe 20. And like they would always tell us where we sucked, and they would tell us where we disappointed them, and tell us like where we needed to improve. But they never told us, I don't want this.
Right.
They never told us, I don't need this. They never told us, you know what, I'm just going to go back to doing it the old way of leaving voicemails and just hoping the guy shows up, or because the problem we saw for homeowners is getting quotes, hiring, and then making sure it shows up and happens on a continual basis. And we learned that early on, and that's how we built out the app. So we had to teach ourselves how to write code, teach ourselves how to design software, teach ourselves how to market software. And that took a long time, took like 3 years, but I'm glad we did it because again, every 4 or 5 years, you evolve into a whole new person. And that's what GreenPal has done for me. I'm a completely different person today than I was a decade ago.
I love that. So I want to highlight a couple things in there. One was you had 2 partners. So once again, highlighting who knew in the moments. Talk a little bit about those 2 individuals and maybe how you met them, and then why you decided to recruit them to be your partner as opposed to maybe anyone else in your circle.
Yeah, it's a great question. And going back to the Navy SEALs talent trust paradigm and the 2x2 quadrant, I didn't know that heuristic back then, but instinctively that's what I optimized for. These were two guys I had known since high school.
Okay.
And I knew they had 2 things. I could trust them. Yeah. Like I could literally trust them with, it didn't matter if they had the password to all of my bank accounts like that, that does not matter. And they do to this day. So there was that. And then the other thing is they like me, they had a chip on their shoulder. They wanted to achieve something better in life. And they had a desire to do whatever it took to get to the next level in life. And so I thought, well, if we have the trust and they have the ambition, we can learn anything else. Yeah. And I was kind of underestimating that second piece, but it was true. And that's how we did it. I recruited these 2 folks, and we wouldn't be where we are today. So people always ask me like, okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, I got to go get some co-founders. And the answer is not necessarily. You most of the time, bad co-founder dynamics kill more businesses than they help. And so you got to look at it like a marriage almost. When we marry our soulmate, we date for a year or 2 or 3, they meet our parents, we really think it through, and then we get engaged for 6 months or a year, but we'll found a business with somebody we've known for 2 weeks. And the reality is, if the business is successful, you're going to spend more time with this person than you are your actual spouse. Yeah. And if the business is, most businesses, you're going to go through hell, and you're going to go through turmoil. You're going to go through conflict and challenges with this business partner that your spouse won't even understand, most honestly. Yep. And then the other thing is, if the business is unsuccessful or successful, it's easier to get a divorce and cleaner than it is to actually unwind a cap table in this business. So it's a much more challenging, more intense, more time intensive, more entangled kind of relationship than an actual marriage. So my point is, it's like, don't found a business unless you can imagine not doing the business without the person, like they're your business soulmate. And then to put to quantify it, if you had $10 million in the bank, would you write that person $10 million to start the business with you? And if the answer is no, then don't start the business. And you say, well, why 10 million? Well, if the business is successful, it may be worth 30 or 40 or 50 million at some point. Their equity is going to be worth $10 million. So would you write them that check today? Well, hell no. Well, then don't start the business with them.
Well, so one thing I want to highlight that you said there that I think is really interesting is, at no point did you say, oh, well, I hired them because they were really good at this, or I hired them because they're really good at that. Don't get me wrong. That's oftentimes a part of business ownership, but you hired them for 2 intrinsic things, right? Hey, I can trust them, and I've known them a long time. And then second, that they had a chip on their shoulder. They wanted to be successful as well. I think oftentimes, to your point, you look at a business partnership and you say, ooh, well, that person's really good at that skill. I don't have the trust and I don't know if they care about future growth, but I do know they're good at this skill. And I think oftentimes that's a better hire opposed to a business partner.
I agree. Yeah, yeah. Hiring for talent and like technical acumen, like hire for that. You don't necessarily have to marry that person. Ideally, you get all three. Oh,
Right. Yeah.
ideally, I mean, that's awesome, and look for that. There's a guy named Paul Graham who is the proprietor of this accelerator called Y Combinator, and
Yeah.
these guys are like behind, you know, tons and tons and tons of huge names: Airbnb, Instacart, DoorDash. List goes on and on.
Yeah.
And he says you should get a hacker and a hustler.
Hmm.
So somebody who is really good at the technical side and somebody who's really good at driving the business forward. So ideally you get one, you get all three. You get trust and then maybe you just get both. You get trust and then you get talent.
Yep.
But trust first
Yeah.
is how I see it. And a lot of times, like in the early days of starting the business, if you have a good co-founder relationship, there's like a benevolence to that other co-founder that gets you through a lot of the hard periods where it's like, I really don't want to go in on a Sunday and do 100 pitch emails to journalists, but I know I got to, and I know that Steve's going to be there, and I don't want to let Steve down, so I'm going to go in.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that kind of benevolence will help you get through a lot of the low points. But on the other hand, I see a lot of people rush to get a co-founder as like a coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not certain I want to do this. I'm a little scared to do it myself, but if somebody else is stupid enough to do it with me, that'll help me. I see
Yeah.
that a lot too. So just be honest with yourself about that
Yeah.
when you're thinking through these things.
That's good. So earlier, you mentioned, hey, so we thought, well, gosh, this will be simple. We'll hire a dev team. We'll pay them, $150,000, $200,000. They'll develop this thing, and we'll be off to the races. And end of story. What happened wasn't that though, and I know you mentioned. I just felt like this was my best idea. So even though I had invested that money and it was a dud, I want to go back to the drawing board and stick with it. So my question there is, oftentimes when we have something that we would say failed, right, or it didn't go as planned, that is kind of the end of the road for it, right? Opposed to reimagining and saying, all right, is the idea still good? Well, if the idea is still good, let's go back and let's figure this out. So talk a little bit about that for people who, and once again, it doesn't always have to be a business, right? It could be your life, right? You made a decision. It didn't go quite like you thought it would, but the idea behind it was still good. So maybe it's not the end of the road for that thought.
Yeah, there's a methodology called the lean startup movement, which you've probably heard of. And at the time we were reading two sets of books that relate to this methodology. One is the Lean Startup, and the other one is the Startup Owner's Manual and Lean Startup is by Eric Ries. Startup Owner's Manual is by Steve Blank. And these two books really kind of guide you through the process of iterating on top of something that's pretty good and building something big and great.
Hmm.
And that's really how we looked at it. I knew that if I could get 12 people in one neighborhood in Nashville, Tennessee to use it and keep using it, then I knew I could get 100 people in Nashville, Tennessee. And I knew if I could get 100, I knew I could get 1,000. And I knew if I get 1,000, I could get 10,000. And I knew if I can make it work in Nashville, I can make it work in every city in the United States. So,
Yeah.
so drawing, like connecting the dots between where you're at and something that is working on a small scale, kind of like an atomic unit, just something very small, but it's working. And then, you could see that if you just, you double it maybe 5 times, you'll have something, important, is how we really looked at it. And it's solving all of the problems along the way that our customers were telling us about, all of the places where we sucked, all of the things that they wish it would do better. Just listening to that feedback as kind of R&D is how we kind of went from, really a punch in the stomach to now, we got 300,000 people using it, doing multiple 8 figures a year in revenue a decade later. And so that's how we did it. And we celebrated the small wins along the way. Like one of our first early goals was just 100 transactions in a week. And it took us like 2 years to get to there.
Yeah.
And then the next goal was 1,000 transactions a week. And that took another 2 years. And then we wanted 10,000 transactions a week. And that took another 2 years. And so celebrating those milestones is how we manage our personal psychology to get through that time.
That's really good. Well, as you're saying that, it makes me think of a phrase that has been so important and vital to my life, and it's the idea of blissful dissatisfaction.
Hmm.
So, kind of describing that is a lot of people fear celebrating an accomplishment because I might lose my drive to accomplish the next thing, right? And on the other hand, if you just keep going throughout and accomplishing different things, but you never take time to enjoy it, I mean, you're living a life for what, right? I mean, to
Yeah.
just say, hey, I did more transactions. I mean, that's not worth it. And so it's kind of finding that balancing act, right? Of hey, I'm not satisfied with where I'm at because I don't want to just plateau. And at the same token, I hit this goal. I want to celebrate it, but I still want to have energy to go for more. So what were things that you guys did to enjoy those moments, but then say, all right, but we're not satisfied. Like, here's the next thing that we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. One key kind of like maxim is Jeff Bezos is still day one, and it always is day one. And
Yeah.
I think he's still, up until recently, he still started every shareholder off that shareholder letter off that way. And so for us, that's just kind of like a personal philosophy that in my
Yeah.
life that if you're not gaining ground, you're losing ground. And so, but at the same breath, like, we had to celebrate those small victories. We really did, because we had to know that, were we on track? Were we on,
Yeah.
if we kept going down this path, would we build something great? And we kind of mapped that out. And so I remember, like, some of those key moments were like in the first, maybe it was the first or second year. It was a Saturday, and like 30 people signed up on a Saturday. And I didn't know who any of them were. So this was a big, huge moment, because I thought,
Yeah.
wow, because up until then, it was a lot of hand-to-hand combat, a lot of hustling, a lot of personal networking. But 30 people signed up, and I didn't know one of their names, didn't recognize one of their names. And so I knew, I was like, well, if I can get that, if I can get 30, I can get 300, I get 3,000, maybe one day 30,000, who knows? And so, and that's kind of like how I manage my personal psychology doing it. And so you, you celebrate it for like 24 hours, and then you move on to the next thing, I think is the key. Like, you don't get like complacent. You don't get comfortable, especially in a technology business, because you'll get left behind really quick. You celebrate for a day or two, and then you realize, okay, well, now it's on to the next mountain. Because if
Yeah.
you don't keep driving forward, you'll get left behind. Like that. That's a George Patton quote. If you're not gaining ground, you're losing ground. And I
Yeah.
think the technology business, most business, is that way. If you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to like have that in your kind of psyche. And business is full of all of these like conflicting kind of viewpoints. It's like, do you have a huge goal, or do you do the small things? Well,
Right.
it's both. It's like, do you celebrate the small wins, or do you not give a shit about small wins and just go after the mountaintops? And so
Yep.
it's like, yeah, it's both. So
Yep.
it's a lot of conflicting kind of dichotomies you have to like reconcile at the same time.
You bet. Now, another thing that you've mentioned a couple of times I think is important to point out is the getting feedback, listening to the feedback, and then changing, those things for your customers. So for me, I probably learned that best through sports. And then I realized when I got into business, oh, this is just like when a coach told you, hey, you need to do it this way. And it wasn't because they were berating me or they were telling me I wasn't good. It was just they were letting me know how I could be better. Right. And I think for a lot of people, they don't seek feedback because their mentality for it is, oh, I'm not good at this, or we're not good at this, opposed to, hey, this is an opportunity for us to be better. So maybe talk a little bit about your mentality on feedback and your willingness to receive that and then implement it.
Yeah, your metaphor is really good. I've never heard it put that way. It's like the coach is telling you where you suck. You got to listen to that so you'll improve. I think the problem is most founders in that situation think of the customers as the fans in the stands. And
Yeah.
it's just like, that guy's drunk, and I'm not going to listen to him. And I don't who cares about his opinion anyways. And so that's kind of like how they frame the
Yeah.
customer feedback, as the fans in the stands, when in fact the customer feedback is the coach, because the coach is the one who can kick you off the team, and the coach is the one who hired you for that job. And so
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good analogy. And so for us, going back to Lean Startup and Startup Owners Manual, that's really a lot of what those books are about, is listening to that customer feedback, letting that kind of guide your decisioning and letting that guide how you build the product. And so it's easy to say like, okay, well, yeah, just listen to customer feedback. But in reality, it's more tactical that it's removing all of the friction between you and your customers. So in the early days, until like your first 100 customers, they should have your cell number.
Right.
When they respond to the email that the system sends, it should go to your email. You should be doing all the live chat. You should be listening to phone calls. You should be taking phone calls 7 days a week, because that's what it's going to take for you to understand, okay, this is what they expect of me. This is what they want. This is where we're letting them down. And you need that as free R&D. And if you're willing to do that, you'll never be at a loss for what decisions you should be taking, or what are the 3 things you should be working on next week, because the customer feedback will guide you to always know innately what you should be doing. Even to this day, like, 10 years in, several 100,000 customers, I still do an hour or 2 of feedback of customer support every day.
That's awesome.
Because there's always a gap that develops between like founder logic and customer logic. And there's like a huge chasm that develops between the two. And so for me, I close that by literally doing live chat, answering phones, responding to emails. And that way I'm always like in the trenches with the customer and know where we're letting them down, know what we need to be working on.
That's so good. I love that. Now, you mentioned it. Hey, we're a multi-million dollar company, which means that we're not only operating in Nashville, we're not even only operating in Tennessee. We've taken ground and we're in multiple states. So are there any states that you aren't operating in? Just talk about how that growth into new states kind of transpired for you guys and what your plan of attack was there.
Yeah, we spent 3 years just in Nashville, just trying to figure it out, trying to figure out the how do we reliably deliver this service to consumers.
Yeah.
How do we create a platform where vendors can make money, like material income, and love using it? Because if they don't love to use it, then there's no product for the homeowners. And it took a long time to figure out that balance, to build the product to deliver on that. And so we knew there was no reason to go into another city until we had that right.
Yep.
After we kind of felt like we had it pretty good, we started moving into other cities around us, Atlanta, and then Tampa, Florida was our third market. And we just kind of went city by city. And then after we started getting some steam and making a little bit of money, we were able to reinvest that into more growth. And now we're nationwide in the United States. If you live in a city with over 30,000 people, you can order a lawn mowing service through GreenPal. So, but we still have a long way to go deep in terms of creating like really, really, really dense networks in every city in the United States, to where, you get bids quicker and the bids are cheaper, and you can hire somebody and they come out faster and they do a better job than anybody else you could ever hire. Like making that flywheel better and better and better is what we're working on now. And eventually we'll move into Canada, UK, Australia. But we have a little ways to go in the United States in terms of creating the network effect in every city.
That's awesome. So for you guys, what's next? I mean, I know, once again, you gave us just a little glimpse of, hey, we got other territories and areas we want to be in, but what else is coming down the pipeline? You're too driven of a guy for me to believe that there's nothing.
Well, like in terms of 5-year plans, I keep it simple. And for us, we need to be a 9-figure business. We're multiple 8-figure business now, doing over 20 million a year in revenue. We want to get to 100 million a year in revenue. And we feel until we get to that point, we're still very much kind of like a niche small business, but we want to get to 100 million in revenue. And so we know the things we got to do to get there, and we're executing on those things. It may take us 3 or 4 years, but that's what's next. And then after that, I'll reevaluate, maybe at that point, I'm no longer the guy to run the business, because I never ran a 9-figure business, or maybe I'll evolve and grow with it. But life in business is like a video game. You just work through one level at a time. You don't worry about Bowser when you're on level 2 and 3. And so maybe we're on level 4 or 5. Maybe we're in water world right now, and we're just trying to get through that. And I'm not worried about anything else until we get to 100 million in revenue.
I love it. I love it. Well, Bryan, I want to say thank you so much for being on today and talking about your pivotal moments. I think just, how amazing, right? You go and mow 1 yard, and that starts this domino effect. I mean, a multi, a 20 plus million dollar a year business, still in that field, just in a radically different way than how it started. $20 to 20 million, right? That can be our slogan there.
Yeah, I like that. One of my favorite quotes is there are no little things, like, even the little things end up being the big things. So yeah, I appreciate that.
You betcha. Well, I'm excited to continue to follow your story. We'll put, how to get on and hire or use GreenPal to hire your yard mowing out. But thanks again so much for being on today, Bryan, and look forward to following up in the future.
Thanks, Phil. I appreciate you having me on.